Welcome to The Bridge, Your Health, Your Voice, the official podcast for the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Pharmacy Patients Program. The Patients Program is the bridge between the community and researchers. The Patients Program created this partnership to help researchers listen to the community's voice in order to build a bridge to an effective learning healthcare community. Here's your host, Rodney Elliott.
Today, we're going to do something a little bit different for some of our listeners. I am the current host right now, but I will be passing the baton to a team member of mine, none other than Michelle Medeiros. She is the Administrative Business Operations and also Director of Research here at the Patients Program. She's going to lead a vigorous discussion today with some of her colleagues. I like to say this is kind of the moment when the group trip, the trip leaves the group text. Pretty sure we all have a text where we all with some friends and say, oh man, we're going to go to this event. We're going to go to this game, or we're going to go somewhere. But then when the event comes, no one picks up the phone. No one answers. But not this group. We have Casey Jackson from the University of Maryland School of Nursing. She's the Director of Research for Quality Improvement and Compliance. We have Aryn Knight. She's the Associate Vice President of Clinical Innovation and Research and Institute at Memorial Hermann Health Systems. And then last but not least, we have Edye Edens. She is an attorney by trade, but she's a relentless research ethicist and regulatory consultant. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I am going to pass the torch to Michelle, and this is going to be an awesome conversation. Michelle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rodney. I really appreciate it. I am super excited to be here today in this room with all these amazing ladies and joining us. We appreciate you tuning in and hearing us today. We're going to have a fireside chat about the hidden heroes in clinical research. As Rodney already introduced, our guests today, they're colleagues of mine, friends of mine, and they're the folks who work behind the scenes to make clinical research happen. And we really would like to kind of give a peek behind the curtain so folks can see what it takes on a day-to-day basis to make clinical research happen, and hopefully to really have a conversation about what we would hope that the community would learn more about our experiences. And so to kick things off, I'll ask our guests to start with a brief introduction and including their current roles. Edye, if you don't mind going first.
Yeah, absolutely. So Edye Edens, I'm actually currently right now a senior attorney at the Kulkarni law firm. And I am an attorney by trade, as mentioned. I also have a master's in international research ethics. I started my career in the academic medical center world, very serendipitously, as we'll get into, as most of us fell very accidentally into this world. I certainly didn't go to law school even graduate law school knowing that this is where I would practice, but have almost exclusively practiced in this space now for just under 2 decades. And have had that opportunity to do it, like I said, inside a very large academic medical center, moving around all the different parts in there, as well as then at a small consulting firm, and now currently at the law firm I'm at. It's a really, really fun journey. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. My name is Aryn Knight. I am the Associate Vice President of Clinical Research for the Memorial Hermann Health System here in Houston, Texas. I have been in clinical research for 25 years. That's kind of hard to say. But I have been bouncing around as well. And I think the majority of us have, from academia to private practice to a hospital setting. And so I'm extremely excited to be here today. Oh, I forgot one other hat I wear. I am also the SOCRA, Society of Clinical Research Associates, chapter chair for the Houston Galveston chapter as well.
Nice. Thanks, Aryn. And thank you all. Just thank you, Michelle, for inviting us. I know we're going to have a ton of fun today. My name is Casey Jackson. I am the Director of Research, Quality Improvement, and Compliance at the School of Nursing, University of Maryland, Baltimore. I also wear many hats. I'm a scientific reviewer for IRB. I also am a director for SOCRA National Board and the chapter chair for the Baltimore SOCRA chapter. And I also have a wide variety background, started out as a bench chemist and, made my way through industry and academia And now I'm here, helping solve problems with you ladies.
Thank you all for your introductions. I really appreciate it. As y'all alluded to, things are a little bit different. I have 2 kiddos that are, in high school and college. And these days, when you go to, at least I've presented at career fairs and asked, the young folks what they'd like to do, and they have their whole life planned out, and they have a path, and it's very clear, and it's a very long name they want to be. And I was like, okay, well, when I went to high school, knew I wanted to do biology. That's about as far as it got. And then I went to college. I was like, well, I like biology, and it didn't get much further than that. And so when I was in undergrad, I thought biology was only lab research. And I didn't know the world of clinical research. I didn't know what my opportunities or options were. I just thought that, again, biology was lab research. And so that's what I knew I wanted to do. And so that's where I started. And there wasn't anything about clinical research in my undergrad. I then went on to get 2 master's degrees, one, and neither of them had anything in relation to clinical research. And so from the lab, I was like, oh my, this is not made for me. I am not made to work in a lab, neither with test tubes nor with animals. This is not made for me. And so I just kind of stumbled along my way, also serving time at the Institutional Review Board and then rolling into clinical research. So I fell into clinical research. And so I would like to hear from each of you. How did you fall into your clinical research career? And what resources do you think would better equip individuals to plan for a career in clinical research?
Who wants to like this one? Casey, go.
Okay, mine's exciting. So I have to thank the stock market crash of 2008 for helping me fall into clinical research. At the time, I was working for Department of Defense, and budget got cut. So it was the first time, hopefully only time in my life that I've lost my job, and ended up getting a position running a lab for a clinical pharmacology center. Because at the time I was doing bench work, a lot of lab work. And well, it turns out that I've been very fortunate my whole life to not have the limitation due to my color blindness. I'm colorblind, and it's very rare for women. Thankfully, when I went through college and worked for the DoD, they had the resources to be electronic printouts, things like that. It didn't rely on me looking at a dipstick in color to get a value. And that's what this lab had. And so essentially, thankfully, because of the laws we have in place, they said, well, we can't fire you due to a disability. So we have another open position in regulatory. Would you like to take it? And of course, I needed a job, so I took it. And that's how I fell in.
I didn't know you were colorblind. That's amazing. Kudos to your superpower.
Right?
But how did we not know that's how it's going to lead to where you are today? That's amazing. Well, if you're okay, I'll go next.
Yeah.
I fell into it by, again, I think very similar to you, Michelle. I went to school. I knew that I liked science. But I didn't think that a doctor was going to be my thing. But I also knew I liked people. And I liked to understand people. So I got a degree in psychology and a minor in sociology and public health. And I was like, okay, what am I doing here? And I was like, I'm going to take a year off before I go to start applying for grad school, because again, I thought my trajectory was psychologist. And I was lucky that my brother was a dental student at the University of Mississippi, and said, hey, I just heard this lecture, and he said he's got some research, and he just lost his research assistant, and do you want me to talk to him for you? And I was like, yes, please. I had taken a stats class and had written a research protocol, so I kind of was familiar with research, but that was my extensive knowledge. I got the position literally a week after I graduated from college. I became a research assistant. Thank goodness that we have some fantastic study monitors out there. Kudos to study monitors who she taught me everything that I knew. I still reflect back and I'm like, oh gosh, what did I do during that time? Because I had no playbook whatsoever. But I literally fell into it and it really kind of hit all the buttons that I liked. You know, it was working with people, understanding people, that I had the science side of things, but I wasn't a doctor at the same time. And I really kind of thought it for some years that this was going to be my thing because, again, you don't go to school to learn how to be in clinical research. It's not a career. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a nurse. And I went and started the nursing school thing. And I was like, nope, back to research. I went and started the psychology thing again. And I was like, nope, back to research. And I literally, my little jaunts here and there all really solidified the fact that I am where I'm supposed to be. So I then decided, you know what, because there is no education for us out there, or there was at that point in time, I'm going to have to forge my own path and educate my own self. And here I go. And I just started meeting people, talking to people, finding people that were in this too, that were like-minded, that wanted to teach me, that wanted to educate me, and literally just creating that little network. And that's how I got to where I am today. Just very hands-on learning myself and really just kind of embracing it and saying, you know what, this is not a stepping stone, Mrs. Physician, who's telling me, when are you going to grad school? No, this is my career. And I'm okay with that, this being my career, and it's a fantastic career. And here I am today.
Love that. Love that. So mine is a little bit different. So I was the person who was going to med school. I had it all planned out, at like 5, right? And I grew up in a family that is full of clinicians. We actually used to joke about whether or not I was going to have like a 6th finger or like a weird 3rd eye, because my dad did tons of clinical research on himself, while he was in med school. He was a very willing participant because it paid. And you were already at the med school, so you knew where the research was. So I'm trucking down the road and I get really sick in college, thankfully nothing fatal. And I'm like, I'm going to tank my grades. You know, this is like when I'm supposed to be in the middle of OChem. And my dad's like, go take a whole bunch of humanities for a semester, like change your, degree if you have to. Just don't tank your science GPA, and then like we'll get you healthy, you'll get back on track. So this happens. And so for a semester, I become an English major to basically take all my humanities for all of college in one semester. And they're like, are you confused? Do you know what building you're in? And I'm like, yeah, I did pretty well in English in like high school, actually. It wasn't the plan. And what were you going to do with English? I mean, was I going to like write fiction? That's not the plan. And it was like the first time I'd ever enjoyed school with my whole body and my whole heart, my whole soul. I loved science. I loved math, but this was different. This was like, I was a junior in college having fun going to class. Like I wanted to get up on a Friday morning, and go. And I just knew there's something different. So I went home and told my entire clinician-based family that I was going to get a creative writing major. I had no clue what that meant. All plans were out the window. And then I started traveling around the world like in a backpack. So this was like complete change. You can imagine everyone in my family is like, what in the world? And I came up with a new plan that was all about going to law school for the exclusive purpose of working in international human rights law. I'd done a lot of work in journalism over the years. I'd worked in newspapers. Like I said, writing came easily to me, so it was a good way to turn over money in college. And realized that free press had a lot to do with how we find out about human rights violations that are happening in all the corners of the earth, and how we then help people, right? And so my, of course, bleeding heart really subscribed to this. Fast forward, I'm graduating from law school 2008, and voila, there are no jobs. I don't care that you have already worked with the United Nations. I don't care that you already published in these 87 different ways. I don't care that you did already get banned from your country. Yeah, nobody cares. You're just out of school. You barely passed the bar, like you're a noob. And so I'm like, okay, I'll pivot. I'll apply for the JAG Corps. The military is not going to go under even a huge recession. But I had 9 months until the Air Force would deploy me to officer training school. And I had gone to a law school that had a huge health law program and was part of a huge academic medical center. And so I had a bunch of friends who'd gone health law. One of them happened to be working with the IRB, says I've got an IRB consultant gig. I'm like, great. What's an IRB? Um, and so I'm thinking 9 months, this is great. Like they know I'm leaving, this will pay my bills. It'll look great on my resume. It's just compliance in a different coat. I've already done a lot of this really, strict doctrine and ethical work. So like, I'll be fine. The end of 9 months, I was offered a full-time position at IU and I decided to stay. And said no thank you to the JAG Corps. And that was just that. And that was the history of it. But I will say after that, I remember that colleague I'd been in law school with and I both talking extensively to our mentors and to our bosses, some of whom were also attorneys who'd gone to the same school, saying, wait, so we share a parking lot between the med school and the law school, and we don't teach a single class at the law school, but yet we hire all the attorneys and then we have to train them up post law school here. Like, why are we not connecting the dots? Like, that seems ridiculous. And we actually started some classes at the law school and at the School of Public Health to try to help that. How widespread did it get? How much did it change? I don't know. But for that particular campus, it changed definitely the perspective. Like, I had a lot of law students, especially, I stopped teaching last year, but in the last 5 to 7 years of teaching, who would come back to me and say, like, I'm so glad you opened my eyes to the fact that there's these other unique spaces in health law that I just didn't know about. I wouldn't have even known how to find my way to this career, but now I'm really interested in some type of compliance, Or I had one particular student who just took to oncology monitoring. I mean, and I was like, okay, I think you found your calling. Like, there you go. Like, go forth. So I think there's something to be said about that, the awareness at the educational level, because like you said, Casey, you've got these, and Michelle, like these students now who are so prepared and so ready, but we're not at the career fair. We're not going like, hey, do you know what this is? Like if you said, if you went to career day in my kid's first grade class, it's very difficult to succinctly say what I do. I mean, let's be fair. Most folks, I'm a health attorney. Just stop there, because you don't really so I do clinical trial compliance with, and so I think finding better communication at a younger educational level, not that there's not a lot of other places to go. I'm not saying school is the only place to advertise, but I think that is one of the areas that is woefully underdone. And yet here we all sit having worked in academia, you know what I mean? And it's you can stand at the Texas Medical Center. You can see all of the educational institutions represented in that mile. How many of them have programs that are going to turn out the next generation of coordinators, monitors, IRB professionals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that's just the thing, right? There is no program. There's no college program for that at all, right? So it's our field, and that's what makes it so unique. It's on the job training,
right?
But
then there's no standard for that. You know what I mean? Like that's where I would rather have the opportunity to know, what pedagogy did you come from? And by that, to be clear, I don't mean ivory tower and name dropping. I don't care what your initials are and are not. I'm not that type of person. Rather, what I mean by that is are you someone who's coming from the ethicist perspective and you've studied that in which cultures? Are you someone who's saying, no, I'm more of an operations individual and I'm coming from a volume perspective because I'm trying to run 10 IRBs at a major AMC. So my perspective is different. I'm thinking of business development. Maybe you're at the oncology center and you're a coordinator or you're a quality, associate or quality management person. That's also a different hat and a different version of this. So that's where I think some standardization or different tracks that would be out there would be amazing. Not only just to introduce the idea of it at all, but then to go hey, maybe you're a people person. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're someone with a science background. Maybe you're not. Let's talk about here's where we see people with that background sort of go. Because that's the other part. It's one part to get the honey, the fly to the honey, right? But then it's once you're there, where are we going to tell them to go? You got a law student who comes to you and goes, oh, I'm so excited. I really want to do this. I'm going, I don't really know where to send you. I guess I'll just call up some of my friends,
I think too, a lot of it is the employers need to realize that there are so many transferable skills out there that can support the clinical research industry, and just human subjects research industry. It doesn't even have to be clinical research. Because I had once hired 2 different folks straight out of high school to be managers because they were really great at attention to detail and they wanted to learn. Don't need a biology background to transcribe and to audit data at all. So I was able to bring them in. I mean, there are IT folks that don't have any science background or medical background at all, and yet they can support clinical trial management system applications just fine. So it requires, I think, employers to realize that there's a whole workforce out there that's untapped if you just kind of lighten up the inclusion-exclusion criteria. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also like, it's that health, it's where we do, as an industry and an ecosystem, we do ourselves a disservice anytime we try to package someone. So take a physician, for example. You've studied years and years of your life. You're, the leading specialist in ABC. That doesn't mean you're the world's best partner, parent, manager of people, policies, procedure, nor should we expect you to be. That's very unrealistic. And so I think that that's something we can focus on and go like, what does this job really require? What is the skill set? Stop being focused on initials. Sorry, Aryn, I cut you off. I did not mean to.
No, I was just going to say, like, this conversation is so relatable to me because in my current role, when I originally saw this position posted, I think I told the story. You guys may have heard it before. This position required an advanced degree, right? And it only required 7 years experience. And I was like, I don't have an advanced degree, but what I do have is 20 plus years of hands-on experience in these various areas. So I am sorry that I don't have a master's degree or a PhD, but what I have, you can't learn from a book. I have hands-on real world experience. And I actually sent that over to the person that I knew that would be one of the supervisors of this position. And I got an interview the next week. Because I was like, you don't necessarily, to your point, have to have these advanced degrees. But what you do have to have is to understand the paths and the things that you can do with the skill sets that you have, the passions that you have as well, and really find your joy. And I tell people that all the time. You have to find what brings you joy at the end of the day. That's not just a job. Because I feel like clinical research has it has so many different things. If you want patient-facing, you can go there. If you don't like patient-facing, but you like this, then you can go here. But a lot of people don't even understand that. I think research coordinator, CRA, and that's it.
And you can do it in your career. That's the other part of it is. It's amazing to me how many folks don't ever cross different silos in their own career. I mean, hey, if you are knocking away at being a great CRA and you love it, kudos. But I need the challenge. And for me, it was I came up in IRB and then into HRPP. So some of those broader elements around auditing, compliance, clinical research, and especially research misconduct. But I knew there was a whole world I hadn't tapped as far as being at the site and understanding the ops and the needs and the compliance from that perspective. And I wanted to. I knew full and well I might hate it, and I knew full and well I might love it, but I was itching for something new. It was I'm going to be in this world. I want to see all the silos. And it ended up, I loved it just as much. In fact, if not kind of more. And it led to some very significant changes in not leaving the ecosystem, but where in the ecosystem I wanted to be and what I wanted the next 10 years to be. And, it's funny, I was just saying this morning to Darshan, who's the owner of our firm, that, to be very, very clear, and I think a lot of you guys already know this is month 4 that I've ever been employed at a law firm of my whole entire, almost 2-decade licensed career, right? And I did that very intentionally because not that there's not great health law attorneys and firms out there that do and play in these spaces, but they're not going to be patient-facing the way that some of us get to be. And they're not going to be operations-heavy the way I enjoyed being. And there are certain things on the job, if you will, where I was never required to be an attorney, not, in certain settings, that I learned so much more than anyone in a firm knows about how to actually handle it. Right. And to me, that was way more valuable. And it reinforced to me when I was then looking at applicants, like, hey, that's great if you have A, B, C, and XYZ after your name, and congratulations. And that should be honored. And that's a lot of hard work. But that doesn't matter, like, automatically translate into you're going to be amazing at anything other than what you've specifically trained. So, like, and it doesn't tell me that you have experience in this area. And that was another reason, like, to complete the funnel of, like, why I think we should take this back to different stages of, potential education out there, whether that's a high school, student or a college student or someone who's in a technical school or I mean, whatever. Because to me, like, someone who's gone in and spent the time getting to know some things on the job, when you then do apply later, I'm taking you more seriously than the person with 8 initials after their name. Because I'm going to be like, oh, you've already worked in, a research center. You already did this. You're giving me all the cues that you understand the life cycle. You know more than the average bear. Okay. I'm going to have to spend so much less time training you up on the job. And that's more valuable than all the MD, ABC, XYZ that you can give me behind your name. I mean, I know a lot of attorneys who are very smart and can recite all of the FDA regs to you, but I promise you don't want them in the room with your monitor or your auditor at your research site. It's not going to end well. They're in over their head. And it's just because that's not what they've done.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a perfect time to transition to our next question. Given the way the conversation has gone, I was wondering if you could talk about what do you wish patients, their families, or the public understood about the behind the scenes and the individual team-based work and research that supports patient care and safety?
So if you don't mind, I'll start this one. I think what people don't understand with clinical research is how highly regulated that we are and how so much patient protection is out there just for clinical research. And so I have to educate this on quite often working in a hospital setting, because obviously hospital executives and leadership is patient safety. Well, then you have to take on that extra layer of research safety, like all of the things that we have to do, which kind of goes above and beyond just the general, this is what we expect for patient safety. Research then has to elevate that. Also, another thing that I like to educate people on is the fact that we have to do a lot of work before anything gets to actually the patient side of things. There is a lot of research. Casey's worked in the lab before. Michelle, you mentioned working in a lab before. I've worked in a lab before. There's also, Michelle, you even mentioned working in an animal lab. There's the preclinical side of things that just doesn't happen overnight. And you have to have sufficient amount of preclinical data, clinical lab data before you can even go to the FDA or IRB or wherever you're going, depending on your research, to even get approval for it to be done in human subjects. So, and then once you get to that phase of the IRB and the review, the rigor that you have to go through with the protection of human subjects. So is it a vulnerable population? Who are you asking these questions to? Is it pediatrics? Is it a mother that's pregnant? Is she breastfeeding? Is it a prisoner? All of the things that we kind of know, but people on the outside don't know that we have to deep dive into these things. And really educate ourselves on how do we handle all of these extra situations on top of, yes, you're a patient, you don't have anything else. I would love for you to be in this research study, but then I have to add on these extra layers of protection for you because you are going to be in a research study or you do want to participate. What do I have to do to protect you just inside the research alone as well? So I think people don't understand, and I think COVID gave us a little bit of a taste on how something can kind of get to market. But what I always had to educate people around with COVID is that there was a lot of research that was being done behind the scenes before we got to where we got with being able to do the vaccines or do clinical trials. Yes, did it speed up? Did it look like it was going fast? Yes, it did. We kind of had to speed things up a little bit. But these things were already being looked at behind the scenes. They're already being looked at. Then clinical research slowed down a little bit because of the pandemic. That allowed them to speed this up more. They're like, we're only focused, we need to speed this up more. We're looking across the board with all of the things that we do in clinical research. We're looking at everything. We're looking at anything and everything that you can think of to try to advance medicine. And the last thing that I want to mention is that I like to, because I worked in pediatrics for so long, and parents are like my children, and I completely, as a mother, understand that. But sometimes I had to tell them, you know what you're doing? May not be a benefit to you and your child, but you're advancing medicine. What you're doing by coming in is helping us to learn, potentially answer a question in advanced medicine for the next person that's coming. The things that the patient care, when someone has to go into the hospital and get the patient care, you're not getting those things and those services just because we're like, that sounds like a good idea. You're getting those because we did research on that before they came in, and we're like, you know what? This should be the gold standard on how we, dose someone that just had a stroke. Should we give them this dose real quick and then give them this dose of this, and then how we should be. All of those things happened because of research. So us getting better in healthcare every single day is because we did the time and patients needed to do the research to justify those transitions.
Yeah, and I would hop in. I know, right? I would hop in and say, like I see three buckets. And the first one is what you were just saying. And to me, it's very linear when I talk to different, folks with different experiences in terms, like they're not inside clinical research, right? As a patient, as a family member, of a caretaker. And the first is what you just said. I mean, I couldn't say it better. It is such a highly regulated, you have no idea the framework that is going in behind the scenes that you are not witnessing. And the first response to that can sometimes be, well, why don't you take some of that burden off of yourself, right? Which means the next thing you have to educate on is, well, we had some problems, right? And you need to understand how we got to the regulation so that we can properly move forward, right? And then the response from there is going to be, okay, so we have to have some regulation. Maybe I feel a little safer now. I understand there's been missteps, but corrective action. So where and why should I participate? What's it going to do for me? Which is what you then hit, right? Perfect on the nail of this is how you get to that next breakthrough. And this is where you're being treated today. This is how we knew what to do there. What I find that's really interesting, and what the time around COVID highlighted for me that I would soapbox on, because I get to echo what Aryn already said, is the scientific method playing out in real time is not something that and I'll put it on us, our industry has done real well with. So as I was running around trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I'm only a few hours shy of a journalism and a PR degree. I can tell you, man, we hit every branch on the way down the wrong tree. Every opportunity we have, because, clinicaltrials.gov, you can't not be a scientist and actually get on there and know what's going on. You can't not be someone who's in our industry. And that was the entire purpose of it, right? And I'm certainly not throwing stones. Pandemic was a heck of a time for any and all involved. What I'm saying is, when you already have individuals who don't understand all of what we've just said, and then they see things moving quickly, and they see potentially some things failing while other things succeed, which means guidance is getting changed constantly on them, it shook out a fear in people. And I remember as a mentor of mine, a longtime mentor from IU, and I were having lunch, and I was like, what is going on with the world? Everyone's questioning science, having this complete breakdown. And she was like, well, but Edye, the scientific method hasn't played out on the evening news like this. And you and I are used to it. We know all the failures that had to happen and the environments in which they were constructed safely in case of failure, right? To then get to the right answers, to get to the medical advancements. Most folks don't. And we haven't educated the world about that. And so for me, that's where I want to spend time with someone. If we've gotten past that, you understand there's regulation, you understand there's risk, you understand it may not benefit you immediately, then I want to talk to you about, do you understand what research is really about? There was a great LinkedIn diatribe, but I think a whole bunch of people hopped on not too long ago where someone was like, look, are we going to advertise that clinical trials is a care option, or are we going to advertise that it's not? Are we going to draw a line in the sand and be honest about this and hope that people understand why they should still participate? Or are we blurring the lines and giving people hope that we shouldn't be giving them? And so I think that then is where you take the conversation next, right? If you educate about the existence, then the next thing you want to educate is about the honest truth. And I always start conversations, especially with folks who I know, maybe they just got the ugly C diagnosis and they know I work in oncology. And so they go, Edye, what do you think? And I go, the first thing you need to know is it's not for everyone. And you shouldn't feel guilty if it's not for you. That's okay. We ask a lot of our patients, but also if it is for you, man, let me tell you what research might be able to do for you. Let me tell you what you might be able to do for research. And so I think that, right? So that like first is that safety. Next is, how do I make a decision? How do I know if it's right for me? How would I know if my loved one should pursue this? Like if I can trust it, then where do I go from there? What do you think, Casey?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, especially with the theory piece. I remember educating a lot of family members around that. Even standard of care practice is based off of like theories and things that this is the evidence we have up until now, and things may come out in the future. That's called being human too, though, right? Like we're all learning lessons. Science isn't exempt from that. So, the more information we have, the more we learn, and things may change, but that doesn't discredit science as a whole, right?
Do you think like what you just said right there about learning something new, right? Uncovering something new as we're moving forward. And does that discredit science as a whole? And what strikes me about that is we hold science, especially like clinicians in this particular space, to this degree of infallibility, right? That is just unrealistic. And it's as if, and maybe that's what we need the average patient to know, is like, we actually don't know all the answers. Like I remember my dad growing up, my dad's a surgeon, and he would always say to me, Edye, the honest truth is I cannot always tell you with accuracy why one of my patients responded to a treatment and 50 others did not, or vice versa. I don't always have the answer. I know a lot more today than I did 10 years ago, and we know a lot more, in 2025 than we did in 1925, but we still don't have all the answers. And I wonder if we've created a false sense with patients that we do, and
talk them enough that science is an evolution. It truly is. We're just basing, but no, just like Aryn said, that it is built on so many layers of checks and balances and scientific thought and expert review. It's not just something that was made up one day. So we have this rigorous background that supports best practice as of right now, what your best chances are. But there's no such thing as 100%. There's just no such thing.
Well, that's why it's so like with research. And when I was in pediatrics and I would talk to these parents and I would say, again, you're helping to advance medicine, good or bad, because we all have questions. And even if the question answer is negative, we then know that's not the route we need to go to. Let's pivot and let's think of what's the next route we need to go to. Because even and people in research are like, oh, everything has to be positive. We have to have positive results. Yes, we strive to want positive results. We really do. But a negative result allows us to be like, you know what? Exactly. I see a little bit of something here, but I didn't focus my attention here. I focused it over here. Maybe I need to pivot and focus it over here instead of focusing in on this one. So even negative have positive effects on how we could ask the question next, how we can frame the question next. So even negative outcomes, I teach people this all the time. A negative outcome is just as good as a positive outcome because we answered a question and we're like, nope, got to change it. Now we got to look at it this way. It's trial and error. It really is trial and error.
It's data. Like the goal is to collect data and test a hypothesis. We all learned this in, sixth grade science, right? And while at that point we had a pretty good guess on some of our trials, if you will, and these are far more complex, it is still the same concept, right? We are going in with a proposition, with a hypothesis, and we are testing it. And sometimes it's going to come back correct. Yes. The answer is true, false, however you want to put it. And sometimes not. But either one's data. And data is a positive all the way around. And I think maybe that's part of it. I know we see a lot of that in the world of research integrity and misconduct when you go into trying to figure out why people took a misstep, especially folks who are like otherwise wildly successful. And this was not, a long-term activity or sense of behavior. And it's almost always because of something like that, right? They were so scared their research wasn't going to work. They felt like there was so much pressure on the line to produce a certain result that then didn't come out of the research. And that's a ton of pressure, right? It's a very difficult part about our industry. No one gets to publish an amazing, PubMed article or get that NIH grant because they proved something didn't work, right? It's usually the other way around. So there's a lot of incentivization for that. And I also think that plays into the PR piece. Think about if you're the average person who's just sitting down to watch the evening news or, scans through a few different sources of online news, hits the top 5 highlights in the morning over a cup of coffee. Like the big things that are going to make the news is going to be, oh, there's a new cure for such and such. It's not going to be, well, we had to try 487 things before we got to said new cure such and such. Yeah. And I get it. Why would you? That's not going to make the news. Nobody wanted to hear about the 486. They wanted to hear about the one that worked. So that's what we read about. But that doesn't portray to the average consumer of healthcare goods and services what we have to go through to get to that. And same thing, the ads on TV. I mean, I know people get very up in arms about whether or not we should be able to advertise from a drug and device marketing perspective. But from this lens, and only this lens, I mean, you don't get on there and go like I always think about the migraine ones because there's been a lot of kerfuffle about those, and I happen to be a migraine sufferer. You don't have them on there going like, this product, after we tried 450 other things,
Maybe we should though.
And made us millions. I mean, you don't get that. You just see someone who's suddenly getting relief, and suddenly they're saying all the right things. And so again, it's reinforced that, you just have all these different options, but you don't realize everything that people have gone through to get there and what the trajectory looks like. Like I always tell folks, especially when I was doing law school, I just want to be clear. I don't have a problem with the fact that pharmaceutical companies make money. I was like, and if you do, this is not going to be the right class for you. And not because I thought they should make obscene amounts of money, but at the same time, let me talk to you about the money that goes into a clinical trial, the years, the operations, the risk, and how many of their drugs have to fail before they get a blockbuster. So there is real skin in the game, and you need to understand that. And so that's where I think we do such a disservice, because the patients they're either going to get cure, here recently, obviously NIH and things like that have been in the news for different reasons, but usually when you're hearing about them, or at least in the past, prior to this current administration, it's been much more about, they just got a new $1 billion such and such because they want to make an initiative to help, certain area that we know is a problem, diabetes, pediatrics, whatever it might be. And so you're hearing about all these wins, or you're hearing about someone who committed fraud and hurt patients because that sells. Yeah. And so it's you're either curing or you're killing, and there's nothing in between. And there's nothing that really gets into the how. It's just the sensationalized end result. It's not well, how do we get to a point where someone could do this? Or how do we get to the part where? I mean, I think most patients, if you said, do you even know how to get on a clinical trial? Let's say you wanted to be on one. Where would you go? Who would you call? What website would you go to? They probably wouldn't know. No idea. Unless they're just already going to an academic medical center because they're like me and they live a mile away. You know what I mean? And they walk in and see all the flyers all the time. Maybe.
Well, I think that's the perfect time to segue. So how can we demonstrate practical examples? So if you wouldn't mind, can you share a specific example where your work directly contributed to improving patient care or ensuring the integrity of clinical research? What does that look to practically to a patient or a patient's family? What examples can you share with us?
Casey, why
I
don't
was gonna say I've got a good one, but please go.
Yeah, I have a good one too.
Great. Well, I want to give a shout out, and it kind of branches off of something I wanted to say in regards to the last question. And that is the kind of that hidden hero of nurse researchers and folks that are doing implementation science. So, you get the pharma, I'm not throwing any shade at pharma, but develop a device or a drug, but how that actually gets put into practice, that direct patient care, that has a research process. And folks don't understand that that's going on. There are nurses out there that want to make sure that you are getting the best quality of life care at the end of your life. And what does that mean? And that mean involve a drug or a device. And so there's this whole ecosystem going on behind the scenes that folks just don't even realize. And so wanted to kind of just give a shout out there, and then also share, an example. There was a study that was looking at, they were looking at the effectiveness of discharge procedures in trauma hospitals to avoid unnecessary rehospitalization, right? So on the surface, this seems okay, pretty minimal risk study, because you're not introducing an experimental drug or device or anything. But the results of that study can produce incredibly meaningful information for hospitals to consider when they're implementing in their own practice. So, given the widespread potential for adoption, it's essential that the data is reviewed for quality throughout the study. So just because the study is minimal risk to the people involved in the study doesn't mean that the impact of the research is low, right? And so, teaching things like good clinical practice, data management practices, that's really imperative for public health. We had a study that had an online recruitment strategy, and overnight they were like, "Oh, I way exceeded my enrollment goal." Okay, looks good on the surface, but let's take a look at the data. And it turns out that bots answered the majority of their research questions to get that $5 Amazon gift card that was the incentive at the end. So, had we not had a quality person looking at that data, then they would have made their scientific decisions based off of bunk data.
So it wasn't even been the wiser. It wouldn't have even been intentional or reckless. They wouldn't have been any of the. I mean, you could argue reckless, but still, that wouldn't have been an intentional misconduct. You would have thought you had the data that was right. That you could really rely on it.
Yeah. But it's because there are checks and balances in place that stopped that from becoming published data that folks are making decisions based off of and implementing into our healthcare practice.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll tell my story real quick because I know Edye probably has a 50 million stories because, she's experienced so much. But before I retired my research coordinator hat, my last study that I was on, again, in pediatrics, I was working in neurology. I was working with rare diseases that really only affected females. And the patient population, usually these girls would get diagnosed with this genetic issue at a very young age, but they could still live their life until 65 plus years old. But of course, with seizure maintenance and other various things, they're wheelchair bound. Sometimes they can't eat, nonverbal, non-walking, things like that. So their parents were very much their caregivers. We were working with this rare disease. Again, doesn't happen very often. And I was very excited to be one of the collaborators in developing the protocol because I'd worked with this rare disease for so long with some fantastic physicians here in Houston. And we were phase 1, so we were not doing anything with children yet. We were only doing the adults. So over the age of 18, I think our oldest patient was 60. bringing them in, giving them this, study medication that was treating the actual condition, the rare disease, not treating the symptoms around it. So not treating the fact that they had seizures because of the rare disease, not treating the fact that they had GI issues because of the rare disease, but treating the genetic malformation of this rare disease itself. And so these patients were in-house for a full week getting this medication to them. And it was amazing to see some of the caregivers, like my daughter has never, when I'm communicating with her, she's actually really paying attention to my words. Like I've never seen her be so attentive to me. She actually even tried to, push herself up in bed. One of the girls actually started walking. She hadn't walked in quite some time, and she was trying to take steps. I was talking to another researcher and the mother in one of the patient's rooms, and the patient, she was standing up. She was still mobile, and she walked over to me and put her head on my shoulder. And her mom's like, I have never seen that happen before. And it really left me. I will say the study was very successful. It went on to in pediatrics to be very successful. It is on the market now for this particular rare disease. I'm not going to name any names, but it was one of those things where I was really like, I can fully retire my patient facing now, having seen these parents just with this glimpse of hope, having had these children diagnosed at a very young age with this rare condition, genetic condition, not anything they could have done about it, not something they tested when we were pregnant, this very rare genetic condition, and seeing them say, oh my gosh, I've not seen this in so long. Like, just to see that really kind of, again, we're in this position of seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes, but it's just, I still hold that. And that's like 10 years ago that this happened. And I still, to this day, if I need that little, I can hold that, and I can see these patients, and I still talk to their parents on like social media and things to see where they are today. But it was one of the most amazing things where I was like, this is why I do what I do. This is why I do it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. My story is somewhat similar in that regard of, not knowing I was ever going to come in this industry when I first came in, and I was living in IRB land and HRPP land where you feel, I think, most removed from patient facing. I was fine with that. I was a new attorney. I was all excited. But over time, that desire to work with or be patient facing that had made me think about medicine from the jump would crept back in. And it was why once I worked more on a site side that I started to go this is closer to the patient. Still not in the room with them, still not trying to, pretend like I'm the doctor, but I'm seeing them in the hallway. I'm near clinic. I'm talking to the coordinators. I feel like I'm making a difference. And one of my absolute day one consulting clients when I came out and joined the first consulting firm I was with was an up and coming, at first it was a research site born out of a private practice, and then it became a site optimization network and was really growing and building, eventually got acquired, was just absolutely fantastic. And so they call me, I'm already, their consultant for several different regulatory needs. They call me and they're like, we're going to ask you something really big. And if you have to say no, then, by all means, go ahead. But here's the deal. We're working with this particular disease. Again, don't want to name names because this is something that now is on the market, but we're working with it. We're the highest enrolling site for this particular. And the symptoms of going too long without being treated is permanent blindness. And so we have essentially a group of participants on our trial that are going to, we know for a fact this is going to go to market. And as soon as it goes to market, they won't have access to the drug because it'll price out. And they won't have the insurance, but they've been on the trial this whole time and they're going to lose treatment. And there's two in particular, and they might lose their vision. So we want to run investigational product. We've talked to the sponsor. They're on board. They're happy to help. And we want to basically run IP out of our office. We've never done that before. It would mean doing a regulatory lift to get us compliant to have IP overnight. I mean, you have 28 days and you're already on the clock. And also, if you tell us this is just illegal, we won't do it. I mean, we're not going to put anyone in peril, including the site. And I'm no pressure. People are just going to go permanently blind. Yeah, no pressure at all. So of course I said yes. I'm I can't promise you're going to be compliant, but I will at least take a look and I will do everything I can. And with their help, truly, it was a group effort. I never take credit for all of it. We did it. And I was just thrilled that they told me that it worked and that these 2 patients were treated. What I didn't know when I went to visit the site in person about a year later, just because they were still, a client and I happened to be in the area, is these patients had written me thank you letters personally. And the site had actually told these patients, we didn't do this. Edye did this. And I was like, no, you guys did this. You are the patient facing. You are the ones who made the magic happen on the ground. I just got the lawyer brain involved. You know what I mean? And they were like, no, we wanted our patients to know who really helps behind the scenes. And I just was like a fountain. And I don't shockingly cry a whole lot. But it was like the closest I've ever been to being able to say, like, I made this direct impact on a patient. And but for my office being in shambles and under construction right now, I actually keep the cards out on my desk as like a laminated memory of like, when you're having a real crap day, this is why you do what you do. Like somebody can see because, you were asked to do something hard and you came through. Because I think that's important. We all, like we've talked about today, we all play a role and it's all different, but it's all a part of the ecosystem and it's all important. And so knowing that and feeling that and remembering that and tethering to that makes us the purpose-driven people that we are.
Perfect. I could not up any better. I thank you all very much. This has been a fabulous conversation. We do have to wrap up, but I would like to see if y'all could quickly, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. Since we've had such a wonderful conversation, and I'd like for folks, for you to recognize, because each of you are a hidden hero in clinical research. So if you could, what would you say in 1 or 2 words is your superpower that you bring to the table for clinical research to protect our folks, to protect our patients, to really, in the ethics space, whatever your superpower may be, what is that as we wrap up?
I was going to say passion. I think I'd say resilience. I think that would be the better word. I'm not like an optimistic person. Like no one would be like, oh, she's positive Polly. But I am the person that you can call and go like, I think this has all gone to complete crap and I'm not sure what we're going to do. And I'll be like, well, now hold on. Wait a minute. We're doing this for the patients. Keep that forefront and then, build from there. So that's resilience, right?
Oh, for sure.
I think mine is compassion, because, you have to understand, I have to put a lot of myself in other people's shoes, to try to understand the whys, the ifs, the hows, because I do think, and I know that's, I'm going on for a bit, but I do think that one thing we all have to do to be successful in this is to be able to problem solve and to problem solve quickly and to learn how to pivot and to learn how to be like, okay, just exactly what Edye said. But I understand what you're saying. I sympathize with you, and let's figure out how we can pivot to make sure that everyone is happy here. So I think you have to have that certain layer of compassion to be able to do what we do, because it is a very difficult, sometimes thankless job that we do here.
I guess I want to say like constant curiosity. That is my superpower. And coming from a place of wanting to be solution oriented for all involved. Yeah, I can't help but my brain kind of just does the mental gymnastics with everything that I'm faced with and going, God, who's this going to affect? Does this make sense? And trying to come at it from a place, again, of curiosity and not judgment. I think,
which is harder than sounds.
Harder.
We're still humans. We're still human, even though you're trying to look at this as objectively as possible. I think sometimes you still have to walk out of the room and go like, and then be like, okay, coming back in. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because I want to remember that it's not. I don't live in a bubble, and we don't live in a bubble. We live in this world that has folks of different languages, different education levels. And how can we make sure that what we're doing has integrity and consideration for all to the best of our ability, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I know that sounds really, like I'm riding on like a high horse or something. It's just more of, yeah, I don't know. I guess that you guys took the good ones. I'm going to say kind of feel well.
But I think those are, if you think about it, that's what I was just going to say is those are 3 pieces to one stool. I mean, those are the 3 legs to one stool in my mind. So I think it does round out and make sense. And it is part of it, having that curiosity and knowing that when you're challenged, I'm sure we all have stories where, you were working with someone who was like, oh, I do not agree with this. And I know you're, compliance or you're in charge, or I am telling you, you need to listen. And when you finally really opened your ears, you went, oh, shoot, I am really glad I listened. Like that person, whatever, doesn't normally act like that, doesn't normally get that aggressive, doesn't normally come at me, da-da-da-da-da. And there was just something about it where you were like, I think this is different, like you were talking about your earlier story, and dug deeper and went like, oh. So I think that's absolutely it. The curiosity is what gets you there.
Yeah. And maybe not, like, I'm not embarrassed for asking questions.
No, we have to.
No, you have to.
So our whole field is about asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about asking questions.
And you'd be shocked how many times, like, I'll raise my hand in a room full of highly intelligent people and be like, okay, I'm sure I'm the idiot here. Laugh me out of the room, but just to level set, why are we doing this with this as opposed to this? And like literally everyone goes blank and you're like, oh, we didn't have that conversation? Oh, I just assumed y'all are so smart. You already dismissed that idea for a reason, but y'all know there's like a way easier way to do this, right? And people are like, what? And you're like, I mean, I'm not a genius. This is just a really straightforward, such and such. I didn't know you didn't know, but let me help you. And so I think
Make it make sense.
That's the other reason that curiosity is important. You don't know but what it hasn't been discussed. You can't make any assumptions just because, we're in a very siloed ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So true. I think it's safe to say that we're all bridges.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. And perfect way to end the Bridge podcast. I didn't do that on purpose.
But even if you did, we're okay with it.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. It has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you opening up and giving a peek behind the curtain that is clinical research, because each of you, in your own way, in your own special way, are definitely the hidden heroes of clinical research. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and coming on board. We look forward to sharing this podcast with all of our folks that can hear a little bit of a peek behind the curtain.
Thank you for listening to The Bridge, your health, your voice. To learn more about the Patients Program, visit our website at www.patients.umaryland.edu.